In this video, we're going to be covering bone growth and bone remodeling. And we're going to start off with the long bone. When we talk about a long bone, we're thinking about the way that a long bone is able to grow in length. This is called endochondral ossification. The word ossification means bone formation. When we have a growth in length, what happens is that cartilage continually grows and is replaced by bone, as shown. So we start off with this hyaline cartilage structure, which will eventually become this hypothetical bone inside of the body, which looks somewhat like a humerus, but is certainly not a humerus. So you're basically just showing some hypothetical non-bone that's supposedly found in your body. So steps 1 through 5. Step 1, the basic idea is that osteoblasts begin to secrete osteoid around the diaphysis, producing a bone collar. Step 2, the cartilage starts to degrade because of calcification of the bone. At step 3, you start to actually see that primary ossification center directly in the center of the diaphysis, or what will eventually become diaphysis. And the osteoclasts are degrading this calcified region. This is the first time that you actually start to see something that resembles spongy bone, and not just that cartilage matrix. Step number 4, the osteoclasts form a medullary cavity, very clearly shown here. You start to see blood vessels entering into here. And at this point, I would say at stage number 4, you're starting to see the secondary ossification centers, which you will notice is in the direction, middle of what will eventually become your epiphyses. And in the step 5, you basically have a fairly well-formed bone. You'll still see areas of hyaline cartilage present throughout childhood and throughout the end of adolescence. Hyaline cartilage will remain inside of what we call the growth plate or the epiphyseal plate, and that will remain there until adulthood is reached, until the long bone stops growing. This is also called the growth plate, so this is where your growth is actually going to be occurring. At the end of adolescence, then, this is going to harden into bone. It's going to ossify eventually at about age 20 or so. But the very last of the hyaline cartilage will remain throughout your lifetime, hopefully. This is called articular cartilage, and it's a particular type of hyaline cartilage that is on the very bone ends of your epiphyses. As the name suggests, articular is at a place where one bone will articulate with another bone or touch another bone. So this is an example of endochondral ossification. And we should say that there's one other type of ossification, and that is called intramembranous ossification. Intramembranous ossification consists of 4 steps that are very similar to what happens here. With the intramembranous ossification, this is basically the bones of the skull. And instead of starting with hyaline cartilage, you start with you begin with a fibrous connective tissue membrane instead. So you'll see the ossification in the center, and you start to see the ossification of these fibrous connective tissues in the center. And then, as you can see, you have osteoblasts that begin to grow outward and continue to secrete osteoid. You can see that there's an osteocyte being buried inside of the osteoid. As the osteoblasts grow outward from that ossification center in the center of the bone, it basically begins to grow from the inside out. Eventually, you have what is considered to be, or appears to be, spongy bone, and you have the vascularization of this bone. And eventually, you will have spongy bone in the center, and then you will have compact bone around the outside, and you can see that osteoblasts are present at every step of the way here. Lastly, let us cover the concept of remodeling. Remodeling is the idea that, yes, bones continue to grow in length throughout your childhood, but they stop growing in length after a certain point. After that point, it's still possible for bones to grow appositionally or grow horizontally. Rather than lengthwise, they can widen or narrow, whatever is most appropriate. So in this, I don't know if it's very easy to tell exactly what's happening here. This is bone remodeling here, where we have the ability to reshape bones depending on what is needed at the time. So a good example of bone remodeling is Wolff's Law, Wolff's Law. Wolff's Law is that a bone states that a bone grows in response to the demands placed on it. So for example, long bones are going to be thickest midway along the shaft because that is where the bending stress is the greatest. Curved bones are thickest where they are most likely to buckle. Wolff's Law has some very interesting implications for how your bones continue to be structured or how they start to lose bone density. So try to think in your mind of the implications of bone remodeling, the implications of Wolff's Law, and think of how bones can be reshaped either by activities or by lack of activities. And we'll talk about examples in class.